You're destroying everything I've worked for.
No. I'm exposing the cracks in the foundation.
I was knuckle-deep in a corroded valve when my phone rang. The valve hissed at me like it had something to say, black water dripping onto the concrete floor of the basement I'd been working in for the last 3 hours. My hands were slick with pipe dope and rust, and I almost didn't answer. But it was Evan, my son. I wiped my hand on my jeans and pressed the phone against my ear with my shoulder. "Hey, kid, what's up?" There was a pause, not the good kind, the kind that comes before bad news dressed up in careful words. "Dad, listen." Me and Allison talked, and we've been thinking about the wedding. I straightened up, my knees popping. 54 years of crawling under houses and into crawl spaces will do that to you. "Yeah? What about it?" Another pause, longer this time. "We don't think you'd fit in." I blinked. The valve kept hissing behind me, a steady rhythm like a clock ticking down. "Come again?" "It's at Ridgecrest Country Club. It's a $25,000 venue, Dad. It's classy, black tie. There's going to be people there from Allison's firm, from mine. Important people. And we just think it'd be better if you sat this one out." I looked down at my hands. Scarred knuckles. Calluses thick as leather. 30 years of fixing what broke. Of crawling into the muck so other people could live clean. These hands had changed his diapers. These hands had taught him to throw a baseball. These hands had signed the checks that paid for his college education at a private university I could barely afford. "You're uninviting me," I said. "Not a question. It's not like that. From your wedding. Dad, don't make this harder than it is. You'd be uncomfortable anyway. You hate that kind of thing. Fancy dinners, small talk with strangers. This way you don't have to pretend." As the story unfolds, take a moment to hit the hype button, subscribe, and write in the comments. Would you forgive him or walk away? The basement was cold, but I felt colder. 28 years. I'd raised this kid for 28 years. Stayed up nights when he had the flu, drove him to hockey practice at 5 in the morning, missed jobs to make it to his school plays, and now I wasn't good enough to watch him get married. "You're right, son," I said. My voice was steady, calm. "I don't fit in. I knew you'd understand. But that wedding?" I looked at the valve, at the way the threads were stripped, at how everything that looked solid on the outside was rotted through underneath. "It won't either." I hung up. The valve hissed louder, and I smiled wider. Something had shifted inside me, something fundamental, like a pipe that had been holding pressure for too long and finally found a crack to release through. I went back to work on the valve, but my mind was already somewhere else, already calculating, already planning. Piper was in the kitchen when I got home. She looked up from her book, took one look at my face, and set it down. "What happened?" I told her, every word, every pause, every careful tone in Evan's voice that said he'd practiced this conversation, probably with Allison coaching him on how to let me down easy. She didn't cry. Piper wasn't the crying type. She'd been married to me for 26 years, raised our son, and never once tried to soften me into something I wasn't. She was smart, sharper than I'd ever be, and she knew exactly what I was thinking before I said it. "You're going to do something," she said. "Yeah." "Something stupid." "No." I leaned against the counter. "Something smart." She studied me for a long moment, her green eyes narrowed. "Don't get arrested, Frank. Whatever you're planning, it stays clean, legal. You win smart, or you don't win at all." "I'm not planning anything." "You're a terrible liar," I grinned. "I know." She shook her head, but there was something in her expression that wasn't anger. It was understanding, maybe even approval. Piper had never liked Allison. From the first time Evan brought her home, Piper had seen through the polite smiles and carefully chosen words. She told me once that Allison looked at our house the way you'd look at a museum exhibit. Interesting, but not somewhere you'd actually want to live. "He's your son," she said quietly. "Was." "Frank?" He chose this pipe. He chose to tell me I'm not good enough for his perfect day. He chose to be embarrassed by the man who paid for his college, who taught him how to change a tire, who stayed up with him when he had nightmares about monsters in his closet. I flexed my hands, feeling the ache in my joints. I'm just choosing how I respond. She didn't argue. She just looked at me and said, "Then make it hurt." I kissed her forehead. "I intend to." That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to Piper breathe beside me, and thought about every moment I'd failed to see this coming. Every time Evan had seemed embarrassed when his friends met me. Every time he'd suggested I clean up before coming to his apartment. Every time he'd corrected my grammar or laughed a little too hard at jokes about blue-collar workers. I'd thought it was a phase. I'd thought he'd grow out of it. I'd been wrong. Around 2 in the morning, I got up and went to my home office. I turned on the computer and pulled up Google, typed in Ridgecrest Country Club. The website was exactly what I expected. Pristine photos of manicured lawns and elegant ballrooms, testimonials from satisfied clients. A price list that made my eyes water. And right there in the About Us section, a mention of their historic building, established in 1952, recently renovated to maintain its classic charm. Recently renovated. I clicked through to the details. The renovation had been in 2010, 15 years ago, and I'd been there. The memory came back in pieces. Ridgecrest Country Club, summer of 2010. I'd been brought in as a subcontractor on a major plumbing overhaul. The general contractor, a guy named Phil Brennan, had been cutting corners left and right, using cheap materials, rushing inspections, pressuring workers to sign off on stuff that wasn't up to code. I'd pushed back. Hard. Told Phil that the sprinkler system he'd installed was garbage, that the pressure regulators were undersized, that the whole thing would need to be replaced within a decade. He'd told me to mind my own business and finish the job I was hired for. I'd finished it. But I'd also documented everything, taken photos, made notes, kept copies of every inspection report and every pressure test result. I still had those files. I went to the filing cabinet in the corner of my office and started digging. It took me 20 minutes, but I found it. A thick folder labeled Ridgecrest CC 2010. Inside were blueprints, contracts, inspection reports, and my own handwritten notes. I spread everything out on my desk and started reading. The sprinkler system had barely passed inspection even back then. The pressure test results were marginal at best. And I'd written a note right there in red ink at the bottom of the final report. Sprinkler system marginal. Recommend full replacement within 10 years. That was 15 years ago. I sat back in my chair and stared at the documents. Then I picked up my phone and called Ray Donovan. Ray was a building and safety inspector for the county. We'd known each other for 20 years, ever since I'd helped him out of a jam involving a bad contractor and a lawsuit that could have ended his career. The contractor had been falsifying inspection records, and Ray had unknowingly signed off on some of them. When it all came to light, Ray had been facing termination, maybe even criminal charges. I'd testified on his behalf, explained that Ray had been deceived, that he'd followed proper procedures, that the contractor had forged documents. My testimony, combined with the evidence I'd preserved, had cleared Ray's name. He owed me. And Ray Donovan was the kind of man who remembered his debts. The phone rang 4 times before he answered. "Frank Mallory," Ray said, his voice rough with sleep. "What trouble are you dragging me into now?" "No trouble, just a favor." "That's what you said last time. This one's clean. I need you to take a look at Ridgecrest Country Club. Routine inspection, plumbing, fire suppression, the works." There was a pause. "Why?" "Because I think they're overdue." "You think? Or you know?" "I know." Ray was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You got a reason, or are you just bored?" "I got a reason." "Good enough for me. I'll put it on the schedule." "How soon can you get there?" "I'm booked solid for the next week, but I can move some things around. Give me a few days." "That works. Thanks, Ray." "Frank, I don't know what you're up to, but be careful. If they figure out you're behind this..." "They won't. They're not dumb." "No, but they're arrogant. And arrogant people make mistakes." I hung up and looked at the files spread across my desk. Then I started making a list. Every contractor who'd worked on Ridgecrest, every vendor they used, every weak point in their infrastructure. Piper appeared in the doorway, wrapped in her robe. "It's 3 in the morning." "I know. Come to bed." "In a minute." She walked over and looked at the papers. "You found something." "I found everything." She put her hand on my shoulder. "Don't lose yourself in this, Frank." "I won't. Promise me." I looked up at her. "I promise." She didn't look convinced, but she kissed the top of my head and went back to bed. I worked until dawn. The next morning, I filed an official safety inquiry with the county. It was all legal, all by the book. I cited my previous work at Ridgecrest, referenced the outdated sprinkler system, and requested a formal inspection of the property's plumbing and fire suppression infrastructure. The form asked for a reason. I wrote, "Concerned about public safety. Property has not undergone comprehensive inspection in over a decade. Previous work on site revealed marginal systems that were recommended for replacement." I submitted it online and got an automated confirmation email. The bureaucracy moved slowly, but it moved. Within 2 days, Ray called me back. "I've been assigned to conduct the inspection. County flagged it as priority because of the public venue status." "When?" "Next Tuesday. That give you enough time?" I did the math. The wedding was in 3 weeks. If Ray found violations, and I knew he would, Ridgecrest would have maybe 2 weeks to fix everything. Maybe. That's perfect. Frank, I'm going to ask you one more time. What's this really about? I hesitated. Then I told him. Not everything, but enough. Ray was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, Your own son? Yeah. That's rough, man. It is what it is. All right, I'll do the inspection. But I'm doing it by the book, Frank. If I find violations, I report them. If I don't, I don't. I'm not manufacturing problems for you. I'm not asking you to. Just look closely, that's all. I always do. But I wasn't going to sit around and wait. I needed to see Ridgecrest for myself. Needed to get a sense of the place. See what had changed, what hadn't. I drove out there that afternoon. The place looked exactly like I remembered. Sprawling green lawns, a main building with white columns and tall windows, tennis courts off to one side. It screamed money. Old money. The kind of place where people like me were supposed to use the service entrance. I parked in the visitor lot and walked up to the front desk. A young woman in a crisp blazer smiled at me with the kind of politeness that's really just a wall. Can I help you, sir? I'm here to speak with the facility manager. It's about a safety inspection. Her smile faltered. I'm sorry, do you have an appointment? No, but you're going to want to get him anyway. Something in my tone made her pick up the phone. She spoke in a low voice, glancing at me nervously. A minute later, she hung up and said, Mr. Halston will be with you shortly. Please have a seat. I didn't sit. I stood there, looking around the lobby. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, oil paintings of golf courses and hunting scenes. This was Evan's world now, or at least the world he wanted to belong to. 5 minutes later, a man in his 40s came striding into the lobby. He had the look of someone who spent more time managing appearances than actual work. Tanned, expensive watch, hair gelled back. His suit probably cost more than I made in a week. I'm Derek Halston, facility manager. What's this about a safety inspection? I handed him a copy of my inquiry report. County's sending an inspector next week. Plumbing and fire suppression. Thought I'd give you a heads up. He scanned the document, his jaw tightening with each line. This is absurd. Our systems are fully compliant. When's the last time you had the sprinklers pressure tested? He didn't answer, just stared at me with growing hostility. That's what I thought, I said. You've got a week to get your house in order, or don't. Either way, the inspector's coming. Halston's face went red. Who the devil do you think you are? Frank Mallory. I did the original plumbing work here 15 years ago, and I know exactly what's holding this place together. I leaned in slightly. Spoiler alert. It's not much. He stepped closer, trying to use his height to intimidate me. Big mistake. I'd dealt with guys like him my whole life. Guys who thought their money and position made them untouchable. Guys who'd never had to fight for anything real. If you think you can come in here and harass us, I'm not harassing anyone. I filed a legitimate safety inquiry. If your systems are up to code, you've got nothing to worry about. I smiled, but we both know they're not. A security guard appeared at Halston's shoulder. Big guy, probably ex-cop, with the kind of build that came from spending too much time in the gym and not enough time in actual fights. He put a hand on my chest. Time to leave, buddy. I looked down at his hand, then back up at his face. Slowly, deliberately. You really want to do this? The guard hesitated. Something in my eyes must have told him I wasn't the kind of man who scared easily. I'd been in enough tight spaces, dealt with enough angry property owners, faced down enough aggressive dogs and drunken homeowners to know how to project calm danger. Halston waved him off. Just get out, and don't come back. I turned and walked toward the door. As I reached it, I glanced back over my shoulder. See you next week, gentlemen. The drive home felt good, better than good. For the first time since Evan's call, I felt like I had control, like I was doing something instead of just taking it. That night, I sat in my home office and went through every contractor file I had. Ridgecrest used local vendors for catering, electrical work, landscaping, event planning. I knew half of them personally. The other half, I could find out about. I started making calls, not to sabotage anyone, just to ask questions, to understand the ecosystem, to map out the connections. First call was to Jimmy Torres, an HVAC guy I'd worked with on dozens of jobs. Jimmy, you ever do work at Ridgecrest Country Club? Yeah, a couple times. Why? Just curious. They treating you right? They're all right. Pay on time, which is more than some places. Why you asking? Thinking about bidding on a job there. Wanted to know what I'm walking into. Jimmy laughed. Man, you don't need to bid on anything. You got more work than you can handle. Never hurts to diversify. We talked for a few more minutes. I learned that Ridgecrest's HVAC system was old but functional, that they'd had some issues with the walk-in freezers in the kitchen, and that management was cheap when it came to preventive maintenance. They'd rather wait for something to break and then pay emergency rates, Jimmy said. Penny wise, pound foolish. Next, I called a guy named Pete Garrison, who ran a catering company. Pete and I had crossed paths at various job sites over the years. We weren't friends exactly, but we had a professional rapport. Pete, you still doing events at Ridgecrest? Yeah, we're their primary caterer. Got a big wedding there in a few weeks, actually. My pulse quickened. That's so? 25 grand event? Probably our biggest this quarter. Why? Just wondering how they are to work with. They're fine. Kitchen's a little outdated, but we make it work. You thinking about doing plumbing work there? Maybe. What do you mean, outdated? Oh, equipment's old. Ventilation could be better. Sometimes we have to bring in our own stuff because theirs doesn't meet our standards. But it's manageable. What happens if the kitchen gets shut down? You got a backup plan? Pete laughed nervously. Why would it get shut down? I don't know. Code violation, inspection failure. These things happen. Well, if that happened, we'd be screwed. Our contract says we have to use the venue's kitchen. We don't have the equipment to cater an event that size off-site. We'd have to cancel. And eat the costs? No, there's a force majeure clause. If the venue can't provide the agreed-upon facilities, we're not liable. But it'd still hurt. Lost revenue, disappointed clients, bad for business. Good to know. Thanks, Pete. I hung up and added Pete's information to my growing list. If the kitchen failed inspection, the caterer would pull out. And without a caterer, there was no wedding reception. Piper brought me coffee around midnight. She set the mug down on my desk and looked at the papers spread out in front of me. You're building a case, she said. I'm building a map. Of what? Every weak point. Every corner they cut. Every shortcut they think no one will notice. I picked up a blueprint and traced a line with my finger. This whole place is held together with duct tape and prayers. They just don't know it yet. She sat down across from me. Evan called earlier. I looked up. What did he say? He wanted to know if you were upset. I told him you were fine. I am fine. You're plotting revenge. I'm exercising my rights as a concerned citizen. She almost smiled. He asked if you'd reconsider about the wedding. What did you tell him? I told him it was too late for that. I nodded slowly. Good. Frank, I need to ask you something. What? When this is over, when you've done what you're going to do, what then? You'll have destroyed your relationship with your son, maybe permanently. Are you prepared for that? I thought about it for a long moment. Thought about Evan as a little kid, running through the backyard with a toy truck. Thought about teaching him to ride a bike, about watching him graduate high school, about shaking his hand when he got his first real job. Then I thought about his voice on the phone. Cold, practiced, embarrassed. Yeah, I said. I'm prepared. She stood up and kissed the top of my head. Then finish it. But Frank? Yeah? Don't lose yourself in this. Win, but don't become something you're not. I'm not losing anything, I said. I'm just reminding people what I've always been. She left me alone with my files and my plans. Over the next few days, I made more calls, talked to electricians, landscapers, event planners, built a complete picture of how Ridgecrest operated, and with each conversation, I found more cracks in the foundation. The electrical system was barely adequate for modern demands. The landscaping crew had complained about drainage issues that suggested problems with the underground pipes. The event planners mentioned that Ridgecrest's insurance was expensive because of the age of the building. Insurance. That was interesting. I called my own insurance agent, a woman named Linda, who I'd worked with for years. Linda, hypothetical question. If a venue has code violations, does that affect their event insurance? Absolutely. Most event insurance policies have clauses about the venue being in compliance with all local codes. If there's a violation, especially something safety-related, the insurance company can refuse to cover any incidents. So if something went wrong during an event, the venue would be fully liable, and depending on the contract, the event organizers might be too. Why are you asking? Just curious. Frank, you're never just curious. I laughed. Fair enough. Thanks, Linda. So that was another pressure point. If Ridgecrest failed inspection, their insurance would be compromised. And if their insurance was compromised, they couldn't host events. Even if they wanted to risk it, their clients wouldn't. Nobody was going to hold a $25,000 wedding at a venue with no insurance coverage. I added it to the list. By the time Ray's inspection rolled around, I had a complete map of Ridgecrest's vulnerabilities. I knew exactly how the place worked, exactly where the weak points were, and exactly what would happen when those weak points failed. I didn't go to the inspection, didn't need to. Ray would handle it professionally, thoroughly, and completely by the book. He'd find the violations because they were there, not because I'd asked him to look. The day of the inspection, I went to work like normal, fixed a leaking water heater in a rental property, gave a quote for a bathroom remodel, had lunch with Piper at a diner we'd been going to for 20 years. My phone rang at 2 p.m. Ray. "I'm done at Ridgecrest," he said. "And?" "Frank, you weren't kidding. This place is a disaster waiting to happen." "Give me specifics." "Sprinkler system's the worst. Pressure's all over the place, half the valves are corroded beyond safe operation, and the backflow preventer hasn't been tested since installation. The kitchen ventilation has grease buildup that's a legitimate fire hazard. The emergency exits are technically in violation because the panic bars aren't properly maintained, and the water heater in the basement is one bad day away from catastrophic failure." I closed my eyes and smiled. "What's your verdict?" "I'm issuing a preliminary notice of violation. They've got 2 weeks to bring everything up to code, or I shut them down completely." 2 weeks? That's standard procedure for violations of this nature. Gives them time to hire contractors and make repairs. But Frank, between you and me, there's no way they're fixing all this in 2 weeks. The sprinkler system alone is a month-long job. Minimum. What happens after 2 weeks? I do a follow-up inspection. If they've made significant progress and can demonstrate a timeline for full compliance, I might extend it. If not, I issue a cease and desist. No events, no gatherings, nothing until everything's fixed. When's the follow-up? I'm scheduling it for the Friday before that big wedding. That gives them exactly 14 days. Perfect. The wedding was on Saturday. 1-day margin. Thanks, Ray. Frank, I did this by the book. Found real violations, reported them honestly. If anyone asks, that's the story, because it's the truth. I know, I appreciate it. One more thing. Halston, the facility manager, he asked who filed the complaint. I told him it was an anonymous safety inquiry. He didn't buy it, but there's nothing he can do about it. He's going to figure it out eventually. Probably. Be careful. I hung up and sat in my truck for a long moment, just breathing. It was working. The machine was in motion. Now I just had to make sure it kept moving. The fallout started within hours. Halston called an emergency meeting with his staff, brought in contractors, started getting quotes for repairs. I know because Jimmy Torres called me that evening. Frank, I just got a call from Ridgecrest. They want me to come out tomorrow to look at their HVAC and kitchen ventilation. They're in full panic mode. You know anything about that? Might have heard something about an inspection. Jimmy laughed. You brilliant troublemaker. What did you do? Nothing. Just filed a safety inquiry. Uh-huh. And I suppose it's just coincidence that they're suddenly finding all kinds of violations? Sometimes coincidences happen. What do you want me to tell them? Tell them the truth. Tell them it's a big job, it's going to take time, and rush jobs cost double. You're a mean man, Frank Mallory. I'm a realist. Over the next few days, I kept tabs on Ridgecrest's scramble through my contractor network. The quotes they were getting were astronomical. $30,000 to replace the sprinkler system, $10,000 for kitchen ventilation, $5,000 for the water heater and associated plumbing, another $5,000 for electrical upgrades to support the new systems. $50,000, more than they'd spent on the entire 2010 renovation, and time was their real enemy. Even if they had the money, there weren't enough hours in the day to complete all the work before the deadline. Halston tried to negotiate with Ray, asking for an extension, arguing that some of the violations were minor and didn't pose immediate safety risks. Ray shut him down. A violation is a violation, Ray told him. You can make the repairs or you can shut down. Those are your options. I learned all this from Ray over coffee one morning. He looked tired. They're pushing hard, he said. Halston's called my supervisor twice, trying to get me overruled. But the supervisor backed me up. The violations are real and documented. They're going to try to work around you. I know, but there's no way around the county. Not on this. Evan found out about the inspection 4 days after Ray's visit. I know because he called me, and this time his voice wasn't polite or carefully measured. It was furious. What did you do? I was in my truck, driving back from a job. I put him on speaker. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't play dumb, Dad. Ridgecrest is suddenly dealing with a major inspection, and they're saying some plumber filed a complaint. That was you, wasn't it? I filed a legitimate safety inquiry. It's public record. You can look it up. You're sabotaging my wedding. No, son. I'm making sure the venue you chose is safe. Wouldn't want anything to go wrong on your big day, would you? Fire hazard, sprinkler failure, someone getting hurt because the facility cut corners on safety, that'd be terrible. You smug son of a... Watch your mouth. He was breathing hard on the other end of the line. You can't do this. I already did. I'll fix it. I'll get a lawyer. You'll what? Sue me for caring about building codes? Take me to court for filing a legitimate safety complaint? Good luck with that. You'll spend $10,000 on a lawyer just to be told you don't have a case. This is insane. You're destroying everything because your feelings got hurt. My feelings? I laughed, hard and cold. Kid, my feelings are fine. This isn't about feelings. This is about you learning that actions have consequences. You wanted to cut me out? Fine. But you don't get to do it clean. You don't get to pretend I never existed and just move on with your perfect life. I hate you. I know, and I don't care. I hung up. For a moment, I just sat there in my truck, hands on the steering wheel, staring at nothing. Part of me had hoped he'd apologize. Part of me had wanted him to understand, to see how much he'd hurt me. But that part was getting smaller by the day. That night, Piper and I sat on the back porch. The air was cool, and the stars were out. She had a glass of wine, and I had a beer. He called you, she said. Yeah. He's angry. Good. She looked at me. You're enjoying this. I'm enjoying watching him realize he's not in control. I took a sip of my beer. He thought he could just cut me out, move on, have his perfect day. He didn't think there'd be consequences. There's always consequences, Piper said quietly. Exactly. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, What's your end game here, Frank? You shut down the venue, ruin the wedding, and then what? You think he'll suddenly respect you? I don't care about his respect anymore. I care about him understanding that actions have weight, that you don't get to throw people away and walk off clean. Even if that person is your father. Especially then. She sipped her wine, staring up at the stars. When I married you, I knew you were stubborn. I knew you were tough. But I never thought I'd see you like this. Like what? Like someone who's willing to burn it all down. I'm not burning anything down. I'm just striking a match and letting nature take its course. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, Don't lose yourself, Frank. Win if you have to. But don't become someone I don't recognize. I'm still me, Pipe. I'm just done being walked on. She nodded slowly. All right. Then finish it. The next week was chaos for Ridgecrest. Contractors came and went like a rotating cast in a bad play. The kitchen was shut down temporarily while they cleaned the ventilation system. The sprinkler repairs started, but hit immediate delays when they discovered the pipes were worse than anyone thought. Several sections had corroded completely through. Replacing them meant tearing into walls, rerouting lines, and essentially rebuilding the entire system from scratch. Halston was bleeding money, and the clock was ticking. I kept my distance, focused on my work, but I stayed informed. Jimmy updated me daily. Pete the caterer called me twice, panicking about whether he'd be able to fulfill his contract. Other contractors reached out asking if I knew what was going on at Ridgecrest. I told them all the same thing. Building codes exist for a reason, and sometimes places get away with violations for years until someone notices. Evan tried everything. He called the county, trying to get the inspection delayed or overturned. He called lawyers, looking for loopholes. He even tried to move the wedding to a different venue, but every place with the kind of prestige he wanted was booked solid for months. He was trapped, and he knew it. But then Allison got involved. She called me on a Thursday afternoon. I was replacing a garbage disposal when my phone rang. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. Mr. Mallory, this is Allison, Evan's fiancée. I know who you are. I think we need to talk. About? About what's happening, about the wedding, about Evan. I turned off the water and wiped my hands on a rag. Go ahead, talk. I know you're upset. I know you feel hurt by Evan's decision, but this is bigger than that. This is our future, our life together, and you're ruining it. I'm not ruining anything. I filed a safety complaint. If the venue's not up to code, that's on them, not me. Don't play games with me. Her voice had an edge now, the polite mask slipping. You know exactly what you're doing, and I'm asking you please to stop. For Evan's sake. For our sake. Why would I do that? Because Evan is your son. He was my son. Then he told me I wasn't good enough for his wedding. He didn't mean it like that. He was just trying to... To what? Protect me from embarrassment? Save me from being uncomfortable? No, he was embarrassed of me. There's a difference. Allison was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was colder. Fine. If that's how you want to play it, then you should know something. Evan's firm has connections, important people. If you keep this up, if you keep harassing us, there will be consequences. I laughed. Actually laughed. Are you threatening me? I'm warning you. Let me give you some advice, Allison. I've spent 30 years dealing with people who think they're untouchable. Rich people, powerful people, people with lawyers and connections and all the money in the world. And you know what I've learned? They all bleed the same when their pipes burst. You're making a mistake. No. Your fiancé made a mistake. I'm just responding to it. He wants you at the wedding, you know. He called me after he talked to you last time. He was crying. He said he made a mistake, that he wants to fix this. That stopped me. He was crying? Yes. He feels terrible about what he said. He wants to apologize. He wants you there. I closed my eyes. For just a second, I felt something crack in my chest. Felt the anger waver. Then I remembered his voice on that first call. The practiced tone, the careful words, the way he'd said, "You wouldn't fit in," like it was a kindness. If he wants to apologize, he can call me himself. He's afraid to. He thinks you hate him. I do? Allison's breath hitched. That's not true. It is, because he's not the kid I raised. The kid I raised wouldn't have been ashamed of his father. The kid I raised would have been proud to have me at his wedding, blue-collar job and all. Your fiancé is someone else, someone I don't recognize, and I don't have any use for him. I hung up. My hands were shaking. I stood there in the kitchen of the house I was working on, staring at the half-installed garbage disposal, and felt something cold and hard settle in my chest. There was no going back now. Evan showed up at my house 2 days later. I was in the garage, organizing my tools, when I heard his car pull into the driveway. I didn't look up when he walked in. "We need to talk," he said. "So talk. Face to face, not like a coward." I set down the wrench I was holding and turned around. He looked terrible, tired, stressed. There were shadows under his eyes, and his usually perfect hair was disheveled. His shirt was wrinkled like he'd slept in it. "You want to call me a coward?" I said. That's rich, coming from the guy who uninvited his own father over the phone. "I didn't want to hurt you. You didn't want to deal with the mess. There's a difference." He stepped closer, his fists clenched. "You're destroying everything I've worked for." "No, I'm exposing the cracks in the foundation. Big difference. This is my life, Dad, my future, and you're tearing it apart because your feelings got hurt." "My feelings?" I laughed, low and bitter. "Kid, this isn't about my feelings. This is about you learning that the world doesn't revolve around your image, your status, your perfect little bubble. You wanted to cut me out? Fine. But don't expect me to sit quietly while you pretend I never existed." "I never said that." "You didn't have to. You said I wouldn't fit in. At your wedding. At the most important day of your life. Do you have any idea what that means? What that says about how you see me? I was trying to protect you." "From what? From seeing who you've become? From being reminded that you came from someone who works with his hands, someone who gets dirty for a living." His face flushed red. "That's not fair." "Fair? You want to talk about fair? I paid for your college, Evan. Worked double shifts to cover your tuition because you didn't qualify for enough financial aid. Missed jobs, missed sleep, missed time with your mother so you could go to that fancy school and get your fancy degree, and now you're embarrassed of me." "I'm not." "You are. Admit it. You look at me and you see everything you're trying to leave behind. Blue collar, working class, not polished enough for your friends from the firm, not sophisticated enough for Allison's family." He opened his mouth, then closed it. His eyes were shining with tears. "I thought so," I said quietly. He took another step, and for a second, I thought he might actually take a swing at me. Part of me wanted him to. Part of me wanted an excuse. But he didn't. He just stood there, breathing hard, his face red. "I hate you," he said. "I know. And you know what? I think I hate you too. Or at least, I hate what you've become." He turned and walked out. A moment later, his car roared to life and tore out of the driveway, tires squealing on the pavement. Piper appeared in the doorway, her arms crossed. "That went well?" "Could have been worse." "Could it?" I picked up my wrench and went back to work, but my hands were still shaking. The days crawled by. Ridgecrest continued to scramble. The sprinkler system repairs were behind schedule. The kitchen ventilation was barely progressing. The water heater replacement hit a snag when they discovered the gas line connections were also out of code. Every problem led to another problem. It was like pulling a thread on a sweater and watching the whole thing unravel. Halston was drowning. I heard through Jimmy that he'd had shouting matches with contractors, with his insurance company, with his own staff. The man was desperate. Good. Ray called me 5 days before the follow-up inspection. Frank, I've got to tell you, this is getting ugly. How so? Halston's been calling my supervisor every day. He's threatening legal action, claiming I'm overstepping my authority, saying the violations aren't as serious as I'm making them out to be. Are they? Yes. Frank, I've inspected hundreds of properties. This is legitimately one of the worst I've seen in terms of neglected maintenance. If they'd been doing proper upkeep over the years, none of this would be an issue. But they let it slide for over a decade, and now it's all coming due at once. What's your supervisor saying? He's backing me up. He reviewed my reports, looked at my photos, and agreed with my assessment. Halston doesn't have a leg to stand on legally. Good. But Frank, there's something else. Halston hired a private inspector to do a counter-assessment. Guy's coming out tomorrow. I felt a flicker of concern. Can he overrule you? No. My authority comes from the county. A private inspector can't override that, but if he finds that I made errors or exaggerated violations, it could complicate things. Did you make errors? No. Everything in my report is accurate and documented. Then you've got nothing to worry about. Ray was quiet for a moment. I hope you know what you're doing, Frank. I do. The private inspector came and went. 2 days later, Ray called me. The private guy backed me up, Ray said. He sounded almost amused. He found 3 additional violations I'd missed. Minor stuff, but still. Halston apparently had a meltdown when he got the report. What kind of violations? Emergency lighting, exit signage, some ADA compliance issues. Like I said, minor compared to the plumbing and fire suppression, but it just piles on. How's it looking for the follow-up inspection? Not good for them. The sprinkler company told me they need at least another week to finish the work. The kitchen ventilation is maybe 60% done. They've made progress, but not enough. So you're shutting them down? Unless a miracle happens in the next 3 days, yeah? I thanked Ray and hung up. Then I sat there in my truck, staring out the windshield at nothing, and felt something that might have been satisfaction, or maybe just cold determination. That night, I couldn't sleep again. I lay in bed next to Piper, listening to her breathe, and thought about everything that had led to this moment. Every choice, every word, every silence. Had I gone too far? Maybe. Probably. Did I care? No. Around 2 a.m, Piper rolled over and looked at me. You're awake? Yeah. Thinking about it? Yeah. Still think you're doing the right thing? I thought about it. Really thought about it. Then I said, I think I'm doing the only thing I know how to do. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, I talked to Evan yesterday. I turned to look at her. What? He called. Wanted to know if there was anything he could do to fix this. Anything he could say. What did you tell him? I told him it was too late, that he'd crossed a line and there was no walking it back. How'd he take it? He cried. I felt something twist in my chest. Good. Frank? No, I mean it. Let him cry. Let him feel what it's like to lose something important. Maybe it'll teach him something. Piper studied my face in the darkness. You've changed? No, I've just stopped pretending. Pretending what? That being nice matters. That doing the right thing matters. That people appreciate sacrifice and loyalty. They don't. They take it for granted. And the second you're not useful anymore, they throw you away. Not everyone is like that. Evan is. He's your son. He was. I turned away from her, staring at the ceiling. Now he's just someone I used to know. Piper didn't say anything else. She just rolled back over and eventually went to sleep. I stayed awake until dawn. The follow-up inspection was scheduled for Friday at 10 a.m. The wedding was Saturday at 2 p.m, 28 hours of margin. I woke up that Friday feeling calm, focused, like I'd been preparing for a fight my whole life, and it was finally here. Piper made coffee. We sat at the kitchen table and didn't talk. There wasn't anything left to say. My phone rang at 9:30. Jimmy Torres. Frank, I'm at Ridgecrest right now. The sprinkler guys are still working. They've been here all night trying to finish. Will they make it? No chance. They're maybe 80% done, and there's still pressure testing and final inspections. They need at least 2 more days, minimum. Thanks for the update. Frank, what happens if Ray shuts them down? Then they can't host events until everything's fixed. And the wedding? Gets canceled. Jimmy was quiet for a beat. That's harsh, man. Yeah, it is. I didn't go to Ridgecrest for the inspection, but I drove nearby, parked in a lot about half a mile away in a spot where I could see the main building in the distance. Ray arrived at 10 sharp. I watched his car pull into the lot. He was inside for almost 3 hours. My phone rang at 1:15. Ray. It's done, he said. And? They failed. Sprinkler system's still not compliant. Kitchen ventilation needs another week. The water heater's done, and they've made progress on some of the smaller issues. But the big ones aren't resolved. What's the verdict? I'm issuing a cease and desist order. No events, no gatherings, no public use of the facility until all violations are corrected and a final inspection is passed. Effective when? Immediately. I closed my eyes and let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. Thanks, Ray. Frank, Halston lost it. He's threatening to sue the county, sue me personally, sue everyone he can think of. He's calling this a conspiracy. Let him. He won't win. I know, but it's going to get messy. Be prepared. I am. The phone calls started within the hour. First was Pete the caterer. Frank, Ridgecrest just got shut down. My wedding tomorrow is canceled. Do you know anything about this? I heard there were code violations. Code violations? Frank, this is a disaster. I've got food ordered, staff scheduled, a client who's going to lose their mind. This is tens of thousands of dollars down the drain. What does your contract say? Force majeure. I'm covered legally, but it's still a nightmare. Sorry to hear that, Pete. Next was a florist I'd worked with before, then a DJ, then a photographer, all of them asking the same questions, all of them panicking about the canceled wedding. I didn't answer most of them, just let them go to voicemail. Then Evan called. I let it ring 4 times before I answered. Hello? You did this? His voice was shaking, not with anger, with something worse, desperation. You shut down the venue. You canceled my wedding. I didn't cancel anything. The county inspector found code violations and shut down the facility. That's standard procedure. Don't lie to me. This was you. All of it. The inspection, the violations, everything. The violations were real, Evan. If they'd maintained their property properly, none of this would have happened. You're insane. You're actually insane. Do you have any idea what you've done? The deposits we've lost? The vendors we have to cancel? The guests we have to uninvite? My job is on the line because my boss is one of the guests and I look like an idiot. You should have thought about that before you uninvited me. This isn't about you? It's always been about me. You just didn't realize it. He was breathing hard, almost hyperventilating. Allison is hysterical. Her parents are furious. Everyone thinks we're incompetent because we chose a venue that got shut down the day before the wedding. My life is falling apart. Good. What? I said good. Maybe now you'll understand what it feels like. You're sick. You need help. I'm not the one who threw away his father like yesterday's trash. That was you. I'm going to make you pay for this. You already did. Now we're even. I hung up. Piper was standing in the doorway. She'd been listening. It's done? I said. Yeah. How do you feel? I thought about it. Thought about Evan's voice, about his desperation, about the way his perfect life was crumbling just like I'd planned. I feel good, I said. And I meant it. That evening, Piper and I went out to dinner. Nothing fancy. Just a steakhouse we'd been going to for years. We sat in a corner booth, ordered our usual meals, and didn't talk about Evan or the wedding or any of it. Instead, we talked about her garden, about a trip we'd been planning to the coast, about whether we should finally replace the kitchen cabinets we'd been saying we'd replace for 5 years. Normal things, good things. For the first time in weeks, I felt like myself again. When we got home, there were 7 missed calls on my phone, all from Evan. I deleted the voicemails without listening to them. You're not going to call him back? Piper asked. No. Frank. He made his choice, Pipe. Now he has to live with it, just like I'm living with mine. She didn't argue. Saturday morning, the day that was supposed to be Evan's wedding, I woke up early and made coffee, sat on the back porch and watched the sun come up. The air was cool and clean, and somewhere in the distance I could hear birds singing. My phone buzzed, a text message from a number I didn't recognize. Mr. Mallory, this is Derek Halston. We need to talk. Today. It's urgent. I stared at the message for a long moment. Then I deleted it. Another text came through, this one from Evan. Dad, please, I'm begging you, fix this, please. I deleted that one too. Around noon, I drove past Ridgecrest one last time, not because I needed to, just because I wanted to see it. The parking lot was empty. No cars, no vendors, no guests in fancy clothes. Just silence. There was a notice taped to the front door. Facility closed by order of County Building and Safety. No public access until further notice. I sat there in my truck for a few minutes, just looking at the building, at the white columns and tall windows, at the symbol of everything Evan had wanted and couldn't have now. Then I drove home. That afternoon, my phone rang again. This time it was a number I recognized. Ray Donovan. Frank, I've got to tell you, this has been one of the weirdest weeks of my career. How so? Halston tried to bribe me yesterday, offered me $5,000 to delay the cease and desist order by 24 hours, just long enough to get through the wedding. What did you tell him? I told him I was adding attempted bribery of a public official to my report. He nearly had a heart attack. I almost laughed. Good. Frank, I've done my part. The rest is between you and your son. But I've got to ask, was it worth it? Yeah, I said. It was. All right then. Take care of yourself. He hung up. That evening, Piper and I were in the living room when someone started pounding on the front door. Hard. Aggressive. I knew who it was before I opened it. Evan was standing on the porch, and he looked like he hadn't slept in days. His eyes were red, his hair was a mess, and his clothes looked like he'd been living in them. We need to talk, he said. No, we don't. Dad, please. You need to leave. I'm not leaving until you listen to me. I stepped out onto the porch and closed the door behind me, partly to keep Piper out of it, partly because I didn't want this conversation in my house. You've got 1 minute, I said. You've ruined my life. Do you understand that? The woman I love is devastated. My career is in jeopardy. My reputation is destroyed. All because you couldn't handle being uninvited to a wedding. You're right about one thing, I said. I couldn't handle it, but not for the reason you think. Then explain it to me. Make it make sense. You told me I wouldn't fit in, Evan. At your wedding. The wedding I would have paid for if you'd asked. The wedding I would have been proud to attend. You looked at me, at the man who raised you, who paid for your education, who taught you everything he knows, and you decided I wasn't good enough. I didn't mean it like that. Yes, you did. And you know what? You were right. I don't fit in your world. I'm too rough, too direct, too working class. But here's what you didn't understand. Your world? It's built on people like me. People who fix the pipes when they burst. People who keep the lights on and the water running and the building standing. You thought you could just step over me and move on. You were wrong. So you destroyed my wedding as revenge? I didn't destroy anything. I just exposed the truth. That fancy venue you chose, it was a death trap. Corroded pipes, failed sprinklers, fire hazards. If I hadn't filed that complaint, something could have gone wrong during your wedding. Someone could have gotten hurt. Maybe even the guests you cared so much about impressing. You don't care about safety. You care about hurting me. You're right. I wanted to hurt you, and I did. And you know what? I don't regret it. Evan's face crumpled. For a second, he looked like a little kid again, lost and confused and scared. I'm your son, he said quietly. You were my son. Now I don't know what you are. Dad? Go home, Evan. Go back to Allison, figure out how to salvage your reputation, and move on with your life. But don't come back here. We're done. You don't mean that. I do. He stood there for another moment, tears running down his face. Then he turned and walked back to his car. I watched him drive away, watched the taillights disappear down the street, watched my son leave my life, maybe for the last time. Then I went inside. Piper was sitting on the couch. She looked up when I came in. Is it over? She asked. Yeah, I said. It's over. Sunday morning, the day after the wedding that wasn't, I woke up and checked my phone out of habit. There were messages from contractors asking about Ridgecrest, from Pete, the caterer, asking if I knew when the venue might reopen, from a few other people in my professional network who'd heard about the shutdown. Nothing from Evan. Good. Piper and I had breakfast together, scrambled eggs, toast, coffee. We ate in comfortable silence, the kind that comes from 26 years of marriage, the kind where you don't need to fill every moment with words. What are you going to do today? She asked. I've got a job in Riverside, bathroom remodel, should take a few hours. Normal work. Yeah, normal work. She nodded. Good. The job was straightforward. Replace a toilet, install a new vanity, fix a leaky faucet. The kind of work I could do in my sleep. The kind of work that had kept me employed for 30 years. The homeowner was a woman in her 60s named Martha. She made me coffee and asked about my family while I worked. You have kids? She asked. I paused for just a second. Then I said, Had a son. Not anymore. Oh, I'm sorry, did he? No, he's alive. We just don't talk. Martha was quiet for a moment. Then she said, That must be hard. It is what it is. She didn't push, just left me to my work. When I finished, she paid me in cash and gave me an extra 20 as a tip. "You do good work," she said. "I'll recommend you to my friends." "Thank you, ma'am." I drove home feeling calm, settled, like something that had been vibrating at the wrong frequency for weeks had finally clicked into place. That evening, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Mr. Mallory?" A woman's voice, professional, formal. "Yeah. My name is Catherine Brennan. I'm an attorney representing Ridgecrest Country Club. We need to speak about the recent inspection and cease and desist order." "I don't have anything to say to you." "Mr. Mallory, we have reason to believe you deliberately filed a false complaint with the county in order to sabotage our facility." "The complaint wasn't false. The inspector found real violations. If you want to dispute that, take it up with the county." "We have evidence that you have a personal grudge against one of our clients, a wedding that was scheduled at our facility. Your son's wedding, to be specific." "So? So that establishes motive for a malicious complaint?" I laughed, actually laughed. "Lady, I don't care what you think my motive was. The violations were real. Your facility was a safety hazard. If you want to sue me for filing a legitimate complaint, go ahead. You'll lose." "We'll see about that." "Yeah, we will." I hung up. Piper had been listening from the kitchen. "They're going to sue you?" "They're going to try. They won't win." "How do you know?" "Because everything I did was legal. The complaint was legitimate. The violations were real. Ray documented everything. They don't have a case. But they can still make your life difficult." "Let them try." She walked over and put her arms around me. "You're not worried?" "No." "Why not?" "Because I've already lost the only thing that mattered. Everything else is just noise." She pulled back and looked at me. "You don't mean that." "Don't I?" "Frank, you have me. You have your business. You have a life. Evan isn't everything. I know, but he was something. And now he's nothing. And I'm okay with that." She studied my face for a long moment. Then she said, "I don't know if I believe you." "I don't know if I believe me either, but I'm going to act like I do, and maybe eventually it'll be true." Over the next few days, I kept working. Normal jobs, normal hours, normal life. Ridgecrest stayed closed. The repairs continued, slow and expensive. Halston apparently had a nervous breakdown and took a leave of absence. The attorney stopped calling after I threatened to file a harassment complaint. And Evan didn't call at all. I told myself I didn't care. Told myself I was better off without him. Told myself that cutting him out of my life was no different than what he'd tried to do to me. Most of the time, I even believed it. 3 weeks after the wedding that wasn't, I got a package in the mail. No return address. Just my name and address written in handwriting I didn't recognize. Inside was a wedding invitation. Evan and Allison's names were printed in elegant script, but the date had been crossed out and a new date written in by hand. 3 months from now. There was a note tucked inside. Evan's handwriting. "Dad, I'm trying again. Different venue, smaller, less pretentious. I don't expect you to come. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I wanted you to know. Evan." I stood in my driveway holding the invitation for a long time. Then I went inside and showed it to Piper. "What are you going to do?" she asked. "Nothing." "You're not going to respond?" "No." "Frank. He made his choice. I made mine. We're done." She took the invitation from me and looked at it. "He's trying to reach out." "Too late." "Is it?" I looked at her. "You think I should forgive him?" "I think you should do whatever you need to do to be at peace." "I am at peace." "Are you?" I didn't answer. That night, I couldn't sleep again. I kept thinking about the invitation, about Evan's handwriting, about the word trying. Around midnight, I got up and went to the garage, started organizing tools I'd already organized a dozen times, trying to quiet my mind. Piper found me there an hour later. "You're not at peace," she said. "I know." "What are you going to do about it?" "I don't know." She sat down on my workbench. "Do you want to know what I think?" "Not really. But you're going to tell me anyway." "I think you won. You hurt him like he hurt you. You made him pay for what he did. But Frank, winning doesn't always feel the way you think it will." "I feel fine." "You're lying. To me and to yourself." I set down the wrench I was holding. "What do you want me to say? That I regret it? I don't. I don't want you to regret it. I just want you to be honest about what it cost you." "It didn't cost me anything. He was the one who lost." "You both lost." I turned away from her. "Maybe. There's no maybe about it. We stood there in silence for a long moment. Then she said, "You don't have to go to the new wedding. You don't have to forgive him. But you should decide what kind of man you want to be. The man who wins at all costs, or the man who knows when to stop fighting." "I'm not fighting. I'm just done." "No, you're not done. If you were done, you wouldn't be out here at 1 a.m. reorganizing tools. You'd be asleep. You'd be at peace." She left me alone in the garage. The next morning I woke up and made a decision. I wasn't going to the wedding. I wasn't going to respond to the invitation. I wasn't going to give Evan the satisfaction of thinking I cared. But I was going to let it go. Not forgive, not forget. Just let go of the anger that had been eating at me for weeks. Let go of the need to keep punishing him. Let go of the weight I'd been carrying. I went to work. Fixed a broken pipe in a commercial building. Gave a quote for a residential remodel. Had lunch with Jimmy Torres and didn't mention Evan once. And when I got home that evening, I took the invitation and put it in a drawer. Not thrown away, not displayed, just put away. Piper saw me do it. She didn't say anything, just nodded. A week later, Ridgecrest Country Club reopened. They'd completed all the repairs, passed the final inspection, and were back in business. Halston had been replaced by a new facility manager. The attorney's threats never materialized into an actual lawsuit. Life went back to normal. Except it wasn't normal. Not really. Because every time my phone rang, part of me expected it to be Evan. Every time I drove past a church or saw a wedding party, I thought about the day that never happened. Every time Piper looked at me with concern in her eyes, I knew she was thinking the same thing I was. This wasn't over. It would never really be over. But I'd won. I'd taken my revenge. I'd made Evan pay for what he'd done. And now I had to live with that victory.